She died with almost nothing in her bank account, but her pantry fed the neighborhood for a week after the funeral. Let that sit for a second, because that one detail, that one quiet, unremarkable fact tells you everything about how she lived, and everything about why we've lost something most of us can't even name anymore. She never called herself frugal. She never followed a budget. She never read a single personal finance book. But she had systems, invisible ones, woven into the fabric of every single day, in the way she cooked, the way she stored, the way she sewed, the way she shopped, the way she moved through her own home. And somehow, in a house that never looked wealthy from the outside, there was always enough. Always. These are 50 tricks from 1962, things that real American grandmothers did without blinking, that have been quietly disappearing for 60 years. Some of them will make you rethink your grocery bill. Some will make you look at your kitchen differently. And at least a few of them, they're going to make you wonder why on earth we ever stopped. Let's go. The tin can on the stove. Why she never bought cooking oil. Here's something that's going to sound strange at first, and then, the moment it clicks, you're going to look at your kitchen differently forever. Every morning in 1962, after Grandma cooked bacon, and most mornings she cooked bacon, she did something nobody does anymore. She didn't throw the grease away. She tilted the pan slowly over a tin can that lived permanently on the back corner of the stove. Every golden drop poured in. The can was never thrown out, it was never washed, it just accumulated, quietly, steadily, one breakfast at a time. And that can, it ran her kitchen. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962, it saved money. That saved bacon fat replaced cooking oil for sautéing vegetables. It replaced butter for frying eggs. It seasoned her cast iron better than any commercial product. It made biscuits that people still talk about decades later. A single pound of bacon produced enough fat to replace an entire bottle of cooking oil, which wasn't cheap in 1962. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the part people always miss. That tin can represented a philosophy that ran through everything Grandma did. Nothing that entered the kitchen left without giving something back. Every byproduct had a second life. Every leftover had a purpose. Every discard was a resource waiting to be recognized. She wasn't running a household. She was running a closed-loop economy in a 900-square-foot house on one income, before anyone invented the word sustainable. Modern cooking taught us to fear animal fat, but in 1962, that small tin on the stove, that was liquid gold, quietly compounding, one breakfast at a time. The bread heel jar, the free meal hiding in your trash. I want you to think about something before we get into this one. How many meals do you throw away every week without realizing it? Not leftovers, not spoiled food, ingredients, still perfectly good, discarded because they're not the part anyone wants. In 1962, Grandma knew exactly which part of the bread loaf nobody wanted, the heel. Kids pushed it aside, Dad usually skipped it. It sat at the end of every loaf like a leftover thought. Grandma smiled and put it in a jar. Not the trash, not the compost, a jar. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962, it saved money. By Sunday, that jar held the foundation of 3 entirely different meals: breadcrumbs for meatloaf, stuffing base for roasted chicken, or warm bread pudding with vanilla and cinnamon that her kids requested by name, not knowing for a single second that it was made from the pieces everyone had rejected all week. Now, here's the question that should be sitting in the back of your mind right now. If she was extracting 3 additional meals from the part of the bread loaf her family didn't want, what else was she extracting value from that we've been throwing away without thinking? Because the bread heel jar wasn't the trick, the mentality behind it was. The habit of looking at a discard and asking, "What is this, really?" That single question, applied consistently across a household, across a year, across a lifetime, that's where the hidden money lived. And it started with a jar on the counter and the end of a loaf of bread. The vinegar bath, the $4 produce wash she did for 2 cents. Walk into any health food store today and you'll find produce wash sprays on the shelf. Specialty formulas, organic certifications, elegant bottles with clean sans serif fonts, $4 each. They do exactly one thing. Grandma did exactly the same thing, better actually, for 2 cents, and she'd been doing it since before most of those health food store founders were born. 1 part white vinegar, 3 parts cold water, large bowl. Every piece of produce that came home from the market went in for 10 minutes, rinsed, patted dry, stored. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962, it saved money. But here's the part the $4 spray bottle won't tell you. It wasn't just about removing surface residue. Produce washed and properly dried before storage lasts significantly longer, days longer, sometimes close to a week longer, because moisture on the surface of vegetables and fruit is what accelerates mold growth. Remove the moisture, extend the life. Now do that math across an entire year of grocery shopping. If every piece of produce Grandma bought lasted 4 days longer than what sits on the average modern counter, she was stretching every grocery run by a measurable percentage, every week, every month, every year. 1 bottle of white vinegar, 25 cents, was quietly outperforming a $4 specialty product by every meaningful measure, and she never once needed a label to tell her it worked. Monday soup, the invisible free meal built into Sunday dinner. Here's a question nobody thinks to ask. If Sunday dinner produces a full meal, why does Monday start from scratch? In 1962, it didn't. Not in Grandma's kitchen. Because Sunday dinner in her house had a second purpose hidden inside it, one the family ate without realizing it was happening. While everyone else was at the table on Sunday evening, Grandma was already thinking about Monday. The roast chicken carcass, with its back, neck, and whatever clung to the bones, went into a heavy pot with cold water and a splash of vinegar before bed. That vinegar pulled the minerals from the bones overnight. By Monday morning, the kitchen smelled like something good was already underway. The vegetables that wouldn't survive another day went in by noon. The last onion, the softening celery, the half carrot nobody finished, the bread heel from the jar on the counter. By 6 p.m., there was a full pot of soup on the table that cost Grandma, in new ingredients, almost nothing, because it was built from a meal she'd already paid for. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962, it saved money. Monday soup wasn't a leftover, it was a planned production. Sunday dinner was the raw material. Monday soup was the manufactured output. Now here's what should genuinely stop you. 52 Mondays per year, 1 complete free dinner each Monday. That's 52 free meals annually, produced not by spending less, but by extracting more from what was already purchased. No budgeting app tracks that. No financial advisor teaches it. But Grandma ran that system quietly every single week for decades. And nobody at the Monday table ever complained the meal wasn't worth paying for. The garden as a bank. How a backyard became a retirement account. Seed saving, the investment that paid back 1,000 to 1. Before we get into this one, I need you to do a quick calculation in your head. 1 tomato, how many seeds? Roughly 30 to 50. Each one capable of becoming a full plant. each plant capable of producing 20 to 30 tomatoes, each tomato capable of producing 30 to 50 more seeds. Now ask yourself, why does anyone buy seeds more than once? In 1962, Grandma didn't. Every summer, as her garden reached its peak, she moved through the rows like a quiet scientist, identifying the strongest plants, the most vigorous growers, the most productive vines. From those specific plants, before the first frost, she harvested seeds, dried them flat on paper towels, labeled them in small paper envelopes with the date and variety, stored them in a cool tin through the winter. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962, it saved money. That tin on the shelf in February held the equivalent of 50 seed packets, each one representing the best genetics from the previous year's strongest plants. Today, heirloom seed packets cost $4 to $6 each. Grandma's collection was worth $200 to $300 in modern equivalent, replenished for free every single year from her own garden. But here's what makes this one genuinely different from anything modern financial advice offers. It compounded. Every year's best plants produced the following year's best seeds, which produced the following year's best plants. She was running a selective breeding program in her backyard, improving her garden's performance year over year for $0 of ongoing investment. That's not just saving money. That's building a self-improving asset, a bank account that pays you back, not in interest, but in tomatoes. The companion planting secret that replaced $40 of garden pesticide. Here's something that will make you question every bag of garden pesticide ever sold. Grandma's garden thrived, full, lush, productive, every season, and she never once bought a pesticide. Never once mixed a chemical treatment, never once read the warning label on a spray bottle, because she never owned one. How? She planted the right neighbors. Marigolds, bright, cheerful, cheap, went at the corners of every vegetable bed, because marigolds produce a root chemical that repels nematodes and beetles. The insects simply don't come near. Basil grew alongside every tomato plant because basil's volatile oils deter the hornworms that destroy tomato crops. Nasturtiums were planted along the outer edge as a trap crop. Pests attacked them preferentially, sacrificing themselves so everything else survived. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962 it saved money. A modern home garden might burn through $40 to $60 of pesticide per season. Grandma replaced all of it with a 10-cent marigold seedling and a few packets of seeds. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting, and this is the part the pesticide companies would prefer you didn't know. Companion planting didn't just eliminate the pest problem, it increased yield. Because the plants supported each other's growth chemistry, her garden regularly produced 20 to 30% more food per square foot than an equivalent chemically treated garden. She spent less, she grew more, simultaneously. That's not a coincidence. That's ecological intelligence applied to household economics. The cut and come again secret. Why her garden never stopped producing. Most people harvest a vegetable garden like they're checking out at the grocery store. You go in, you take what you came for, you leave, and then you wait and wonder why the garden slows down. Grandma harvested her garden like she was running a subscription service, and it never stopped producing. The method had a name she used without ceremony: cut and come again. For lettuce, kale, spinach, herbs, chard, green beans, any plant with a central growing heart, she came in not with a basket and a pulling motion, but with scissors and a selecting eye. Outer leaves only, growth from the edges, the heart always left completely intact. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962 it saved money. A single properly managed leaf lettuce plant harvested this way could produce fresh salad for a family of 4 all summer long without replanting once. A zucchini harvested correctly at 6 to 8 inches before it becomes the legendary zucchini that overtook the garage triggers the plant to produce more. Leave it too long and the plant's energy goes into seeding and production stops. Here's what should surprise you. Most modern gardeners don't know this. They harvest incorrectly, they wonder why their plants die early, and they replant, spending money they didn't need to spend. Grandma's scissors, working correctly, turned one planting into a season-long harvest. The garden wasn't a one-time purchase, it was a renewable income stream. And cut and come again was the mechanism that kept it running. Storing root vegetables in sand, the 5-month refrigerator that cost nothing. I want you to picture something. It's February. The ground outside is frozen solid. The garden is buried under 6 inches of snow. The grocery store is a 20-minute drive on icy roads. And yet, Grandma goes to her basement and pulls out firm, sweet, perfectly preserved carrots from her October harvest. No electricity, no freezer bags, no vacuum seal technology. Just a wooden crate and dry sand. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962, it saved money. Here's the mechanism, and it's elegant in its simplicity. Root vegetables lose moisture through their skin and spoil through contact with each other. Dry sand solves both problems simultaneously. It wicks away surface moisture while physically separating each vegetable from its neighbors. The cool, consistent temperature of a basement does the rest. Carrots, beets, parsnips, turnips, harvested in October, trimmed to 1 inch of their greens, laid in single layers, buried completely, would still be firm, sweet, and table-ready in late February or March. 5 months of fresh storage, from a bag of dry sand worth 25 cents. Now ask yourself what's sitting in your refrigerator right now, taking up space, consuming electricity, that could be sitting in a cool, dark box of sand, perfectly preserved for free. Because Grandma had effectively built a second refrigerator for materials that cost nothing, and it held more, used no energy, and worked for 5 months. The question isn't whether this works. The question is why we ever stopped. The Three Sisters, a gardening system so smart it fed civilizations. This last one in our garden section carries a weight the others don't, because this isn't just a money-saving trick. This is a 2,000-year-old agricultural system, borrowed from Native American tradition, adopted by American homesteaders, practiced quietly in suburban backyards in 1962, that modern sustainable agriculture is only now beginning to fully understand. 3 plants, planted together, always. Corn, beans, squash. Here's why they work as a unit. The corn grows tall, providing a living trellis for the bean vine. The beans fix atmospheric nitrogen directly into the soil, fertilizing the corn and squash naturally, eliminating the need for added fertilizer. The squash sprawls wide along the ground, its broad leaves blocking weeds and retaining soil moisture, eliminating the need for mulch and reducing the need for watering. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962, it saved money. Fertilizer cost money, weed killer cost money, mulch cost money, irrigation cost time and water. The Three Sisters system reduced the need for all 4 simultaneously. But here's the part that should genuinely stop you. This trio produces a nutritionally complete diet. Corn provides complex carbohydrates. Beans provide protein and essential amino acids. Squash provides vitamins, minerals, and fiber. Together, they can sustain human life indefinitely. Grandma wasn't just growing food, she was growing nutritional sovereignty, complete dietary security from a 10 by 10 foot patch of backyard soil for the cost of 3 seed packets. A family could survive on the Three Sisters garden. In hard years, some families did. That's not a gardening hack. That's the most important financial safety net a backyard has ever provided. When clothing was currency and needles were knives. The darning mushroom, the $0 sock repair tool that extended clothing life by years. Here's a question that's going to reveal something uncomfortable about how we think about money. When was the last time you threw away something that still had 90% of its useful life left just because one small part failed? A sock with a hole, a shirt with a loose button, a sweater with a pulled thread. In 2024, you replace it. Maybe you feel a small pang about it, but it goes in the bin. In 1962, Grandma reached for something most people today have never seen, a darning mushroom. A smooth, dome-shaped wooden form, about the size of your palm, that slipped inside the sock like a fist, holding the fabric taut and workable. A needle threaded with wool or cotton moved across the hole in a tight weaving pattern, horizontal passes, then vertical, building new fabric from thread, invisibly filling the gap. 10 to 15 minutes, a few cents of thread. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962, it saved money. A well-darned sock was indistinguishable from a new one on the outside. Inside, you could feel the slight thickness of the repair, but no one saw inside. Now, apply this logic across a family of 5 wearing socks every day, every week, every year. How many pairs does that family go through? How many does Grandma's family go through? The gap in those two numbers, that gap is real money, multiplied by every piece of clothing in the household, multiplied by every year. But here's what's deeper than the dollars. Darning was a refusal, a deliberate, quiet refusal to accept that something was over just because it showed a flaw. That philosophy, this still has value, don't throw it away, applied to socks and applied to everything else, to furniture, to relationships, to ideas. The darning mushroom wasn't just a tool, it was a worldview, held in the palm of a hand. Turning the collar. The trick that added 2 years to a dress shirt. You ready for one that sounds impossible until you see it done? Because this one is so specific, so clever, and so completely forgotten that the first time most people hear it, they literally pause and ask, "Wait, that works?" It works. In 1962, men's dress shirts were expensive relative to income. A good cotton dress shirt might represent a full day's pay. And the part that always failed first, always, was the collar. Friction from shaving, rubbing against the neck all day, laundering. The collar frayed and thinned long before the rest of the shirt showed anywhere at all. Most men would have the shirt replaced at this point. Grandma had a different idea. She removed the collar carefully, seam by seam, flipped it exactly 180 degrees, and reattached it, the inside of the collar, which had never been exposed to sun or friction and was still pristine, now facing outward. The shirt looked brand new. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962 it saved money. 2 wearable years became 4 for the cost of an hour's careful sewing. But here's what should really get you. This wasn't a poor person's workaround. Middle-class homemakers across America did this as a matter of standard household practice. It was expected, intelligent, unremarkable. The idea that clothing is disposable, that's not tradition. That's a recent invention, a manufactured belief sold to us starting roughly in the 1970s and accelerating ever since. Grandma didn't receive that memo, and her husband's dress shirts lasted twice as long as his colleagues to prove it. The feed sack dress, when grocery bags became Sunday best. This one is a piece of American history so rich, so strange and beautiful that when most people hear it for the first time, they stop and say, "That was real?" It was real. Starting in the 1930s and continuing well into the 1960s, many American staple products, flour, sugar, chicken feed, cornmeal, came in cotton fabric sacks, and manufacturers eventually figured something out. Women were cutting them open and sewing them into clothes. So they started printing the sacks. Florals, plaids, stripes, gingham checks, botanical patterns, some of them beautiful enough to hang in a textile museum. Grandma didn't miss a beat. Every sack that entered the house was evaluated as fabric before anything else. Could this become a dress? Could these two patterns be combined into a child's blouse? 3 matching sacks could make a woman's skirt. 5 coordinating prints could become a complete outfit. And the trading network that emerged around this, quietly remarkable. Women on the block would compare sacks over the fence. I have 4 of these blue checks. Anyone have the yellow flowers? I need 3 more to finish a dress. An informal textile exchange running neighborhood to neighborhood, turning grocery byproducts into a community fabric economy. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962 it saved money. Store fabric cost 10 to 15 cents per yard in 1962. Feed sack fabric cost nothing. It was a byproduct of groceries you were already buying. But the lesson here is larger than the fabric. Grandma looked at everything that entered her home and asked one question. What else can this be? The bag wasn't a container. It was raw material. It was potential waiting to be recognized. And that single mental habit, that reflexive second look at every discard, was worth more than any specific trick on this list. The memory quilt, when scrap fabric became a 50-year asset. Here's something worth sitting with. A quilt made from clothing scraps in 1952 might be on someone's bed tonight. Think about that. 70-plus years of useful life, from fabric that was technically already used up. In 1962, Grandma's quilts were not decorative. They were not craft projects. They were not gifts for Instagram. They were assets. Made from the scraps of worn-out clothing, old work shirts, outgrown children's dresses, curtain remnants, flour sack fabric too small for a garment. Each quilt was a dense, functional, durable object that provided warmth for decades without replacement. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962, it saved money. A wool blanket cost real money in 1962 and wore out. A store-bought quilt cost even more. Grandma's quilt cost the price of thread and batting, maybe 75 cents, and lasted generations longer than either. But there's a financial layer in the quilt that most people never notice. In homes without central heating, which was common outside major cities well into the 1960s, a heavy quilt on a bed could reduce the room temperature needed for comfortable sleep by 4 to 6 degrees. That's a measurable reduction in heating fuel consumption per bedroom, per night, all winter long. A free quilt was also, quietly, a monthly heating credit. The emotional value? You already know it. That quilt meant something. It didn't depreciate. It didn't go out of style. And 50 years later, it's still the first thing someone reaches for on a cold night. That's not just warmth. That's the definition of an asset that doesn't diminish. The 8-cent elastic repair. The clothing resurrection nobody does anymore. This one is almost painfully simple, and yet it might be the most commonly overlooked clothing repair in America. Elastic waistbands go bad in pajamas, skirts, children's pants, aprons, workout wear. The fabric around the waist is structurally perfect, fully intact, good for years more use. But the elastic inside is shot, stretched, useless. In 2024, that garment goes to Goodwill, or the trash, replaced. In 1962, Grandma reached into her sewing basket for a safety pin and a spool of elastic. She'd open a small seam at the back of the waistband, 2 stitches, no more, thread the new elastic through using the safety pin as a guide, Overlap the ends by an inch, stitch them together in a tight X, close the seam. 12 minutes, 8 cents of elastic. Garment fully restored. You might think this is useless today, but in 1962 it saved money. But here's the insight hiding inside this simple repair, and it's one that changes how you look at everything you own. Grandma never condemned a whole garment for the failure of one component. She diagnosed specifically what failed, and she fixed that one thing. A broken zipper doesn't mean a broken jacket. A worn collar doesn't mean a worn shirt. A failed elastic doesn't mean failed pants. That diagnostic habit, that refusal to let one small failure define the whole, wasn't just about clothing. It was a financial philosophy. And it kept money in her pocket that most people are handing over at the register right now, without even realizing they have a choice. If you found Grandma's little saving tricks as useful as we think they are, make sure you don't miss Part 2 and Part 3. We've got even more hidden gems coming your way. And if you want to support this channel and keep these timeless tips coming, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.